chapter 44. And what we did in chapter 44 was discuss a level of love of Hashem that we all have, because it's part of the gift of love that God gave us. As we explained last week, and as we explained about 6 weeks before that, every Jew has a soul. In the core of our soul, we have a natural love of God. And in chapters 18 through 25, we learned the power of that natural love. In chapter 44, we revisit that natural love, and we find out that there's a lot more depth. There's a lot more levels of love than we initially thought. And the first love that we discussed in the beginning of chapter 44 is loving God because He's your life. If you love life, you love God, because God is the source of all life. And the more you feel the need for life, the more you feel the lack of life, the more you can really feel that, like, God as my life. Wow. I want life. I want God. If I need life, I need God. Now, today, we're going to talk about an even more powerful love. Much more powerful than God is your life, God is your Father. And we're going to explain why this is even more powerful. So we're in chapter 44. We are on page Samach Gimel. About halfway down the page, we're up to the words V'ahava Rabbah. V'ahava Rabbah v'gedolah mizu. An even greater love than loving God because He's your life. And if you want life, you want God. And if you remember, we said, if you're sleeping and you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, life. I got my life back. I want God. How do I get God? I'm going to study Torah. What am I doing sleeping? Hey, we should all sleep. Well, sleep, I want to connect to God. I want to be one with Him. I want more life. I want more God. I study Torah. But there's a love that's even greater than this. And guess what? The good news is we all have this love, just as we all have the previous love. It's embedded in the psyche of our soul. It's wired into our soul. How do we have this? B'Yerusha Me'avoseinu, as we discussed last week. Because we come from amazing stock, yichus. We all have the best yichus, the best ancestry. We all come from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. And because they served God so incredibly, after an Abraham, and then a Yitzchak, and then a Yaakov, and Avram, and Isaac, and a Jacob, God said from now on, all of their children will have soul, and only their children will have soul. And as we explained last week, until now doesn't mean now means until then, people were given soul as per how much they would use it, if they deserved it by what God saw would be their future choices. So the fact that your father or mother did or didn't have was completely irrelevant. Each man for himself. No yichus, no ancestry here. You could have a father that's an Abraham and be very different. No relationship. But after an Abraham and a Yitzchak and a Yaakov, there's no such thing. All of us have soul. Every descendant has soul, and nobody else in the world, though they could be very lovely, wonderful, refined people that truly desire God. They're amazing Noachites that live their life for God, but they can't have soul. Only Jews, and every Jew. And wired in our soul is the love for God. Is the love for God we learned in 18 through 25, that you're willing to sacrifice for God. Is the love for God we discussed last week. He's my life, I want God. And is the love for God we're going to talk about right now. Now this love is explained in Raya Mehemna. Raya Mehemna is a section of Zohar. Raya Mehemna is Aramaic, as actually a lot of Zohar is Aramaic, and a lot of Talmud is Aramaic. That was just speaking in the normal language of the time. Raya Mehemna means faithful shepherd. In Hebrew we would say Ro'eh Ne'eman, a faithful shepherd. In Aramaic, Raya Mehemna. Now, who was this faithful shepherd? We're talking about the ultimate faithful shepherd. The faithful shepherd is Moshe Rabbeinu, is Moses. He is the ultimate faithful shepherd of the Jewish people. We've had many, many shepherds since. They were all an extension of him. Every leader of the Jewish people is the next Moshe. And every one of us is a little bit of Moshe. And this is actually a very pivotal concept to understand what the Rebbe is about to tell us. So when we think of Moshe, every one of us has a little bit of Moshe, and then a leader of the Jews has more, and then there's that ultimate Jew, the ultimate leader of the Jewish people in every generation, who is an extension of Moshe, who's that faithful shepherd. So the faithful shepherd Moshe, he's discussing this love, because this is his love. And what does he say? Kivara, like the sun, the ishtadel, that is trying, basar avoy v'imei, for his father and mother, dirachim lo, that he loves them, yasser migarme, more than he loves himself, more than his love for his own body, benafshe v'ruche chule, and more than his love for his own soul, then his nefesh and his ruach, then the levels of his soul. Raya Mehemna, the faithful shepherd, Moses, said, you know what love for God means? It means you're God's child. And a child loves his father. A child loves his parent. And you love God to such a degree that you'll put everything aside for him. You'll sacrifice your life. You'll sacrifice your spiritual life, your physical life, your body, your spiritual life, your soul. You'll sacrifice it all out of love for God because he's your father. He's your parent. And a child will sacrifice everything for their parent. And as the Rebbe concludes, this was the quote. Now the Rebbe says, we all have the same father. Who's our father? God. So what is this love? This love is the love of Moses, of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe's talking about his love for God. And what's his love for God? He would do anything. You want my body? You want my soul? If you say, okay, a body. What does a great holy person like Moshe care about his body? You want my soul? I care about you more. I love you more. What's my soul in contrast to you? This love is the love of the greatest tzaddik, the holiest Jew. Moshe. This is Moshe's love for God. And yet, we're learning here, it's all of our love as well. Meaning, we actually learned this before. This quotation, if you have a great memory, this exact same quotation is in chapter 10 of Tanya, when we discuss a tzaddik. When we discuss this absolutely perfect Jew who is completely subsumed in his relationship with God. That's all he cares about. That's all he is. He doesn't even have an evil inclination. His animal soul is part of his godly soul. His whole existence on every physical and spiritual level is serving God. And about him, we brought this quote. And now in chapter 44, we're bringing this quote about all of us. So what is going on? The Rebbe says, this is the point. Yes, we learned this already. And now we're saying, it's not just for the greatest tzaddik, for the holiest of holy, for the Moshe. It's for every Jew. And guess what? We're not even saying it's embedded in your potential that you might work on someday. We're saying you have it. It's an inheritance. It's something you all naturally were gifted with. It's like sitting in the closet. So this love of the greatest tzaddik is the love I have for God. And I got it as a gift. I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew because my mother was Jewish, because I converted properly. I'm a Jew. I have a soul. I have a soul. I have this love for God. I love God to this degree. He is my father, and I'll do anything for him. Because a child will do anything for his parent. I'll sacrifice all my physical. What's my physical compared to God? I'll even sacrifice my spiritual. That's an even, because if you really care, then you're like, oh, but the spiritual, like your portion in the world to come, or your spirituality, or like spirituality. It's God's needs. That's what I'm thinking about. God needs me to sacrifice my spirituality. That's what I'm here for. If you think, I don't come to my mind now, is just an obvious example of Lubavitcher Rebbe, who standing for was giving out dollars. Just think what, so to speak, he could have accomplished in those hours in his own personal spiritual journey. Would he ever think like that? Of course not. No. What does that have to do with anything? My spiritual journey? That's not the point. The point is, what's God's need? God has a need. That's what I'm here for. God has a need for me to be wasting my time doing whatever I'm doing. If this is God's needs and I could be spiritually doing something far greater and more advantageous to me, so what? It's not about my needs. It's about God's needs. That's this love. So this love, you can understand why the Rebbe said it's far greater than the love we discussed in the beginning of the chapter, though the love we discussed in the beginning of the chapter was awesome. But why is this far greater? Because if you think about the point, we were saying, I love God because he's my life. Now we're saying, what's your life for God? So in the first love, which is an amazing love and, halavai, but still there's a certain cap. If I'm loving God because he's my life, then I'm loving my life. I'm putting my life first, and I love God so much because he's my life. But here I'm saying, what's my life? What's my physical life? What's even my spiritual life? It's not about my life. It's about God. So that's why this love far supersedes the previous love, though again, they're both very amazing things, and we got them both as gifts, and we have them embedded in our soul, and we want to bring them out. But now here comes the obvious question. Who do we think we are? Here we're saying, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, is sharing with us his love for God. He loves God more than his physical life, more than his spiritual life. And us too, because we got it as a gift, we inherited it in the merit of our forefathers. Who do we think we are that we're saying that we could have a trace of the love of Moses. Like, this sounds ridiculous. This is Moses' love. And we learned in chapter 10, this is the love of the greatest, holiest tzaddik, not just a regular tzaddik, not just a regular person who has completely given himself over to God and is in the process of destroying the evil inside of him. We're talking about the tzaddikim that have accomplished this, that have destroyed their evil, that no longer have an evil inclination, that their animal soul is subsumed in part of their godly soul. That's the tzaddik we learned in chapter 10 that has this love. And the Rebbe says, and us too. And we got it as a gift. And we inherited it. And it's embedded in all of our souls. Like, who do I think I am? Me and Moses? Like, who do I think I am? What's going on here? So that's the obvious question. So the Rebbe says, Mikol Makom. It's true. I'm not Moses. You're not Moses. But nevertheless, Hari Efes Katsehu, a little bit. The Shemes Minehu, a trace, a stain, a drop. Meirov Tuvo V'Oiro, from his enormous goodness, from his enormous light. Meir is illuminated, L'Klolos Yisrael, to every single Jew, B'chol Dar V'Dar, in every single generation. K'moshe Kasav B'Tikunim, as it's explained in another section of Zohar, Tikkunei Zohar, Dispashtrusha, B'chol Dara V'Dara, L'Anhara Lon Pule, that the radiance, that the glow of Moses is in every single generation to illuminate. So the Rebbe is saying, you don't think you're Moses? You're right. But you're a little bit of Moses. As I mentioned earlier, we're told that in every generation there's a Moses. That's another quote. The glow, the radiance, the shine of Moses is in every generation. And of course, it's in every generation on, as I said, 3 levels. The ultimate leader of the generation is the Moses of the generation. And every Jewish leader, because of course you can have many leaders, small l, in a generation, they have somewhat of Moses. And every single Jew has that spark of Moses. And we discussed this earlier in Tanya, a few chapters ago, chapter 42, I believe. We discussed this extensively, that we are all fed by Moses' energy on various levels. On one level, there are 5 levels of soul, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. And the 3rd level, Neshama, the core of that Neshama, in each one of us is Moses, right? We said on the 1st level, Nefesh, the core of that Nefesh is King David. Every one of us has King David as the core of our Nefesh. The core of our Ruach is Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi. Every one of us has a bit of Elijah inside of us. The core of our Neshama is Moses. Every one of us has from Moses as the core of our Neshama. The core of our Chaya is Adam Harishon, Adam, the first man, and one of the holiest people of all times, who has a very bad rap, but the holiest people of all times. And the core of our Yechida is King Mashiach himself. That's why every Jew has the ability to access Mashiach, because every Jew has inside of him from the energy of King Mashiach himself. So all of us, on the core of our Neshama, Moses. And also, as we learned 2 chapters ago in Tanya, Moses is feeding the da'as of our soul. Da'as means connectivity. I learn something, but then I have to connect to it and fuse with it for it to become real, for me to have an emotional response. So Moses is feeding my das. And also, Moses embodies chachma, that highest power, wisdom. Obviously, he's the human embodiment of divine wisdom, and also means the ultimate power of nullification. So Moses is the core of our soul, level 3. Moses is feeding our da'as, our ability to connect and fuse from what we know to what we feel to God. Moses is feeding our ultimate wisdom of God. Moses is feeding our ultimate nullification of God. So because of all that, yeah, it's Moses' love, and I got a bit of him inside of me. He's part of my soul arsenal. And therefore, since it's his love, on a certain level, it could also be mine. So it's like, who do I think I am? I think I'm someone that's a recipient of enormous powers. And because I'm a recipient of such enormous powers, I can love God like this. I always think when I think of this concept in Tanya that just like the first love, loving God as He's your life, the more you have this awareness of like, I need life, the more you can naturally connect to God as my life. And I think for this love, loving God because He's your father, because He's your parent, the more you feel that for your parent, for your father or for your mother, and you feel, I would do anything for my parent. And some of you haven't done anything for your parents. And if you have done anything for your parents, or would do anything for your parents, or have sacrificed for your parents, or would sacrifice for your parents, your physical needs, your spiritual needs, you put your parents first, of course, and have done so, the more naturally you can connect to this idea. You get it on the inside. You know what it means. You know what it means that for your parent, you'll do anything. And when you think of this idea of, for my parent, I'll do anything, and then connect to God as your ultimate parent, it's a very natural segue. It just is very, very organic. It just flows loving God this way because He's my real ultimate parent. So my parents aren't my parents, but He even more deeply is my parent. And if I put my parents before anything, and I have done so physically and spiritually, yeah, I should do so for God. And as I think about it, it more and more pulls it out of me. Now, a person's going to ask a question, which nobody asked. Maybe I didn't give you time to process enough to ask this question, but it's sort of an obvious question, which is, we're a little confused here because we said that this love we have as an inheritance, because we come from really holy stock, the best yichus, the best ancestry in the world, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they gave us a soul, embedded in the soul of the love of chapters 18 through 25, the love that we discussed, loving God because He's your life. The more you need life, the more you can relate to that love. And loving God because He's your father, and I would do anything for my parent. The more I would do anything for my parent and have done anything for my parent, the more I can relate to His love. So we are crediting this love with the soul we received in the merit of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Now we're saying this love is actually Moses' love. He's the voice of the faithful shepherd of Zohar. He's talking about his love. And what's his love to me? Because I have a part of him inside of me. As I explained on various levels, I'm fed by, nurtured by the energy of Moses. And as such, in a small way, I can attain his love. So the question is, wait a minute. Who am I giving credit here to? Is this a love from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob? Like my natural love, as I've learned already, is from them? Or is this a love from Moses? Because I seem to be saying now it's a love from Moses, but I was saying I got his inheritance, which means it's a love from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So what's going on? So the answer is, of course, both. Meaning the fact that we have the depth of ability to love God comes from our soul in the merit of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Their merit. We inherited it. It means it's a natural love. It means it's coming in their honor. But the fact that this energy is going in this direction, this slant to it, this intention of it, I'm viewing God as my father, and just as I would do anything for my parent, I would do anything for God. And just as I would sacrifice for my parents, I would sacrifice for God. And just as I would sacrifice physically and spiritually for my parents, I would sacrifice physically and spiritually for God. All of that, the way we fashion this energy, we molded it in this direction, comes from Moses. This is his slant. This is his perspective. This is how he loves God. And because he's feeding my soul, this is how I can love God as well. So the power comes from our forefathers, and the direction of that power is from Moses. I feel this is such a strong message that I was giving us because he's saying to me, I'm not a tzaddik. He's saying to me, the love I described before, like 34 chapters ago as the love of the tzaddik, oh, that's your love too. And oh, guess what? You have it already. You don't even have to create it. Like we spoke about the tzaddik creating it. You don't have to create it. You were, like envision it, you were born on the top of the mountain. You know, people have to climb and climb and climb and climb. You were born on the top of the mountain. You were born with these soul powers. You were born with this native ability. It's yours. Just use it. So of course comes the question, well, that's nice and inspiring. How? How do meaning, I'm talking. And you could be thinking, I don't really love God like that. But I'm saying, yes, you do. It's embedded in your soul. You have this energy. So how do we move from have this energy to actually feeling it? And the Rebbe tells us how. So the Rebbe continues. Rak only. So we have all this enormous power, and it's very, very concealed. It's very buried. B'nafshos kol beis Yisrael, in the souls of every single Jew. Every single one of us has this, and we all start off with it very concealed. Ulahotzi avazu, and to extract this love, hamisuteres, that's concealed, me'ahelen v'hester elagiloi, from its state of concealment, which is nice but doesn't really help in a practical way, to be revealed, which means I feel the love, which means I live this way, which means I'm inspired and racing toward God, which means I put him first. I put him before my physical comforts. I put him before my physical needs. I put him before my spiritual comforts. I put him before my spiritual needs. That might sound weird. Like, when do you put God before your spiritual needs? Isn't like your spirituality and God like the same direction? But no, just as I gave the example for the Lubavitcher Rebbe, also for ourselves. You could sometimes think, well, for me, it'd be better to do this, but maybe for other people, it'd be better if I did that. Like, maybe for me, better not to have guests so I can have a faster meal and then I'll have more time to learn or pray or say Psalms. And like, what does God need more? Maybe he needs more me to make this meal. Now, for me, I would maybe more enjoy and it would feel more spiritual to be learning or praying. Or maybe I could learn myself and it could feel like, wow, this is such an amazing experience. And if I learn with someone else, maybe it feels like, oh yeah, I'm learning stuff I already know. But what does God want more? Well, God wants more that this other person has this opportunity. So if I'm caring about God's needs, that's what you do. So even in the spiritual realm, there's the idea of sacrificing your own advancement in spirituality for someone else. Now, of course, when you give to someone else, it's ultimately feeding you even more, and there's no question about that. But that's not what you're thinking. When the Lubavitcher Rebbe made so big and vast this concept of going out, shlichus, being an emissary. And this was the concept of, wait, like, isn't the ultimate thing to sit and learn Torah? We believe the ultimate thing is to sit and learn Torah. But if there's a need going out there, if there's a fire burning, go deal with that fire. That's more important. Even though the ultimate spiritual thing for your own soul is to sit and learn Torah. But the compensation prize, which is very big, is when you give to others, the time you spend working on yourself is very, very, very intensified. So it all works out in your favor totally. But that's not what you're thinking. You're thinking, I'm going to sacrifice what I think is best for me spiritually because I'm putting God first. So I'm putting God first in front of my own physical needs, and I'm putting God first in front of my spiritual needs. And this we all have inside of us. And imagine living like this. So the Rebbe says, so how do you do it? Lios bisgalus libo umocho, to take this love that you all have and to bring it in a revealed way so you feel it in your mind and you feel it in your heart. Lo nifles. It's not so wondrous. It's not so far-fetched. Below rechaikehi. It's not so far from you. Elakarov hadavar ma'oi. This is sort of the Rebbe paraphrasing the opening verse that this entire work is based on. Right? There's one verse. And we have 53 chapters for us to learn it. The thing is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to do it. So the Rebbe is saying, what I'm telling you now, it might seem like, whoa, the love of Moses, me, the love of Moses, whoa, putting God before my physicality, putting God before my spirituality, like, whoa. The Rebbe says, like, relax. It's very doable. It's not so far from you. It's not so wondrously, amazingly distant from you. It's actually very, very attainable, the Rebbe is saying, based on this verse. What did this verse say? The mountain is very close to you. Bificha, in your mouth. Ubilvavcha, and in your heart, which also means in your thoughts. La'asoso, to do it. So what the verse is teaching us, this verse, by the way, is from Moses. What the verse is teaching us is, if you want to harness this deep inner power, go to your mouth, go to your mind, go to your actions. When you think about it, when you talk about it, when you do things about it, naturally, that inner power becomes a real force, becomes something that you don't just have latent inside of you, but actually something you're living with every single day. So the Rebbe says, Dahainu, meaning to say, Lios ragil al lishono, talk about it. It should be natural on your tongue. It should be something you're talking about. V'koilo, on your voice, meaning the Rebbe says, hear it. Don't whisper it. Hear it loudly. Use the words. Use your voice. Open it up strong and talk about this. Talk about what? Talk about God being your father. Talk about God being your parent. Talk about putting your relationship with your parent before your own needs. Talk about putting your relationship with God, your father, your mother, your parent, before your own physical needs, before your own spiritual needs. Talk about these things. Hear it. Don't talk about it in your mind's voice. Literally, the Rebbe is saying, literally say these words. As you say these words, you're pulling out this energy. It's a very famous quotation from a Jewish work called Sefer Chinuch, which says, Acharei ha-maisim nimshachim halavavos. After the actions are drawn the hearts, which means, a lot of times, whatever, Freudian psychology, it's all coming from whatever's latent inside of you, and that's molding everything. And Sefer Chinuch is saying, what you do, that's what's molding everything. Of course, there is an inner reality, but what you do really affects your inner reality. So here, what you do also means what you consciously think, and also means what you consciously say. And as we're saying, say it loudly, say it proudly, say it a lot. This concept is true for the specific thing we're talking about here, which is a very important thing. And it's also true in general. I don't know if anyone here has seen this. Maybe they consciously did it, or maybe it just sort of happened by accident. But when you talk about something a lot, it's also, we're just also thinking and doing, but we're just focusing on this first point. When you talk about something a lot, it starts to become more and more you, more and more natural to you, more and more the way you go. Like if someone gets on this hashgacha pratis kick, everywhere they look, they see the hand of God, the divine providence. Now, of course, everything is the hand of God. Everything is divine providence, but sometimes we see it a little more openly. And they talk about it. They talk about it maybe to inspire themselves, maybe to inspire their spouse, maybe to inspire their children, maybe because they just are talking about it. But the more they talk about it, the more they'll see it. The more you talk about trust in God, the more you trust God. The more you talk about your belief in God, the more you believe in God. The more you talk about how this world is a crazy, scary, terrifying place, the more you're scared. Anyone here has seen this relationship in themselves in anything, that the more they talk about something, the more that thing becomes stronger and stronger in them, in either direction, good or the other. So that's true on its own. Now imagine if you do it deliberately. Imagine if you say to yourself, buying into what the Alter Rebbe is saying here in Tanya, you don't have to buy into me, it's written in the Tanya. Buying into what the Alter Rebbe is saying in Tanya, you say, wow, the more I talk about something, the more it becomes me. So what would happen to me if I erased from my vocabulary, I can't handle this? Imagine if I just deleted that sentence, forbidden, taboo, doesn't exist. And every time I want to say it, I turn it into, I can handle this. I can't handle this. I can't handle this. Um, imagine doing that consciously. Imagine consciously, like we're saying the world is a safe place. The world is a safe place. I'm safe in this world. We are safe in this world. Imagine saying that consciously. Or someone just chatted to me, like her example, which is when you watch news. The more you watch news, the more you walk around fearful. Because the more you're thinking about it, probably talking about it, hearing it, it's percolating in your brain, and it just makes you more fearful. And the more you would substitute that and say, the world is a safe place, the world is in God's hands. Every time any of these things come up in your brain or in other people's conversations, the world is a safe place, the world is in God's hands. The world is a safe place, the world is in God's hands. You think I'm just spouting words, I don't mean it. That's not true. Because inside of you, you do mean it. Because inside of you, you have belief in God. You have a very strong belief in God. So you're not saying something that's fake. You're actually saying your deepest truth. And therefore, it's very, very powerful. It's very, very impactful. So the Rebbe is saying, imagine saying, I love God like I love my father. I love God like I love my mother. I love God like I love my parents. I would do anything for God like I would do anything for my parents. Imagine just keep saying that. You could say, but it's not true. I don't. Well, again, the more you have this type of relationship with your parent, the easier it is to say those words, because at least there's the truth of you knowing in terms of relationship with your parent. But it's actually really, really even truer in terms of relationship with God. Because you do love God that way. That's our point. It's an inheritance. It's embedded in your soul. So imagine the power of these words. I'm just stopping at this point. I mean, sort of our time is over. And of course, we're going to talk also about consciously thinking it and other things. But I think this is such a practical takeaway. You know, you want to walk away with something in your hands and just understand this one super practical point. The more I talk about something, the more it becomes me. Let me talk wisely. Let me make a conscious decision what I want to talk about. Let me aspire to talk about godliness. Let me aspire to talk about how much I love God. Or let me at least talk about things that I want to instill in my brain, like the world is a safe place. God is totally taking care of us. There's so much of God's kindness in my life. You know, like we could bore people by telling them all of God's kindnesses in our life, but don't worry, it's good. Because for sure for you, as well as for everyone else, it's just really, really deeply, deeply enrooting that that's your reality. That is your reality.